Well, Chapter 8 of the Communication Systems book begins our third section of graphic communication for the Communication Systems course. So we're going to get started here with technical drawing tools. And so when we do technical drawing, or traditionally what was known as drafting, we used a variety of equipment to make the drawings. And so this chapter goes through some of those traditional pieces of equipment that were originally used but still are used today. And this is a good place to note just that drafting is still an important component of the technical drawing arena. As we're going to get into in the last chapter of this section talking about CAD systems, the majority of technical drawings, yes, today are drawn with CAD systems, but the hand drafting that has traditionally been used for hundreds of years is still very important. So when we would do technical drawings, we would do drafting traditionally, we would start with a set of pencils. In this case, if you were enrolled in a drafting course, you would more than likely have to buy a box of pencils. They're wooden pencils, and typically there would be anywhere from 8 to 12 different pencils in this set. And each one of the pencils was a little bit different. And specifically, it was different on its hardness and softness of lead. And that was rated along the scale that you see here, starting from 7 and 6B, going across down to 3, 2B. In the middle there was an F and H, and then it moves over to the right hand side of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, H. So the B type pencils were softer, whereas the H pencils were harder. And that was important in the fact that the softer pencil lead would make thicker, darker lines, because again that lead was soft, so as you put pressure on that pencil it would draw a thicker, darker line. As compared to going across on the right spectrum with the H pencils, those are very hard pencils in that you could draw very soft and light lines with those. So we would use for our object lines or our border lines, we would use a much softer pencil because those need to be dark and real thick, as compared to let's say a dimension line was more kind of in the middle range. But then if we were doing something like a construction line that was going to be erased later on, we would use our 6H pencil to draw nice soft lines. As that has advanced, we started to use more mechanical pencils or fine line pencils. The box of pencils were great, but one of the disadvantages there was that you were having to continually sharpen your pencil. As the pencil got dull, you would have to it would make more smudges, it would create less concrete lines, and so it was critical that you had a sharp pencil at all times. So as mechanical pencils or fine line pencils came about, they had some real advantages in the fact that they were a specific size, just like the wooden pencils, but one of the main advantages is that you didn't have to constantly sharpen your lead. You could just click the button and get some more lead. So traditionally we had mechanical pencils, and what you see here is actually a picture of a fine line pencil, though we refer to it today as a mechanical pencil. But actually originally that wasn't the case. The mechanical pencils were a little bit different in that they had different sizes of lead from each range that you would put into the pencil, and the way that it went into the pencil was a little bit different. The fine line pencil is what we use as what we call mechanical pencils today, and typically they come in either a 0.5 or 0.7 millimeter thickness. So the original mechanical pencils actually had a lot more various lead opportunities that you could use. You could use specific sizes of lead, whereas with the fine line pencils that we use today, or what we call mechanical pencils, typically you have a 0.5, a 0.7, and you can get a 0.9 as well. And so nowadays, usually when we do drafting, we'll use the mechanical pencils or fine line pencils because they're just a lot easier to use. Again, you don't have to sharpen them as much. You can just click the button. There's an eraser on the top, but that usually goes pretty quickly. But typically when we do drafting now, we'll have a 0.5 millimeter, a 0.7, and a 6H. So the 0.5 is kind of for our medium lines. The 0.7 is for our thicker, darker lines, but then it's still nice to have a 6H wooden pencil for our construction lines, again because it's a nice light line that we can erase easily. And those are the 3 pencils that we basically use today. Erasing is important in the technical drawing arena when you're doing drafting. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to use construction lines that need erased, and so it's nice to have a good eraser. We can also use an eraser shield that helps us to cover up. You know, if we have some line here, we can use the eraser shield to kind of cover up a section and then erase next to it, which is a nice option. So, but there's a lot of erasing involved when we're doing hand drafting. Inking was a traditional form of getting formal documents created. Prior to having printers or plotters like we do today, if we were going to make a set of architectural plans, or let's say a set of construction documents for a large facility, well, there are a variety of different contractors that would need access to those, and so we were going to need to make multiple prints. The electricians, the mechanical equipment, the plumbing system, for anywhere beginning with the architect to the engineer to all the various subs, we're going to need copies of these plans. And so before copy machines, before printers and plotters, we would have to go through a process to make multiple documents. Well, in that case, we made the original usually as an inked project, meaning that after we had the pencil, the line lead on there, we'd come back and ink it. That way, that would give us a nice dark line. So as we went through the copying process, using a variety of techniques we'll talk about here in a little bit, we had different ways that we could do that. And so the ink allowed us to to have a better original to make copies from versus just the pencil lead. However, one of the disadvantages, certainly ink is permanent, and so that's great for copying, but not great if you make mistakes. And so you had to be very meticulous when you did your inking process. 2 different types of pens that we used to use. We had an adjustable ruling pen, which is kind of like you see here in the picture, where it actually had a wheel on it that you could adjust, and at the end of that were 2 tips. And so as you adjust that, you could adjust the thickness of how the ink that you were putting down. And then we had technical fountain pens that we could use as well. When we do drawing on a surface, there are a variety of surfaces that we can use. Traditionally we either use a drawing board like you see in the picture here, so we have a drawing board there, or we could have a drafting table. And so the whole table was set up to where the tabletop itself could incline up to give you a nice surface to draw on. And then most of the time they would have some kind of special cover, usually some type of vinyl cover on top of, let's say, the wood tabletop. That vinyl cover is just a nice surface to draw on. It was especially helpful when you put your compass into that, that it made a nice, that your compass stuck right where you wanted it as you were working that around. As compared to a hard wood or tabletop, it was easy for that compass to move around. So typically, whether it was a portable drawing board like you see here or an actual drawing table, it would usually have some kind of cover on there. When we do drafting, we can use a variety of different papers. We can have opaque papers or translucent. The difference between the two there, obviously translucent paper is going to allow light to flow through it, to shine through it, whereas the opaque papers are not as much. And so traditional opaque drawing paper was either kind of a blue, a light blue, pink, or green color. But when we do have translucent papers, which are a little higher quality, and also would allow for better copying if we were going to move forward there. So we could use tracing paper or vellum or mylar. Vellum was probably the most popular and a very popular type of professional looking drafting paper. So typically we would maybe practice on an opaque paper and draw it initially, and then once we had everything down, we could come back and redraw it on a piece of vellum. We can use a variety of paper sizes in the drafting industry. We identify those as A, B, C, D, or E size paper. And so the standard 8.5 by 11 or 9 by 12 paper that we typically or usually use is a size A. If you move up to 11 by 17, that goes to a B, and so forth, as you see on the chart there. Other equipment that we use in our drafting process, we use a T-square. That allows us to draw a perfectly horizontal line, but then it also allows us to use triangles as we set a triangle on top of a T-square. Depending on the angle of that triangle, we could draw a variety of other lines as well. And so that T-square gives us a nice parallel straight edge. More advanced drafting equipment, you could use what's called a drafting machine, which is basically an arm that has both a horizontal and vertical straight edge included in it, and that arm will move around very easily. Much easier to work with than the T-square, has a lot more opportunities, but in terms of expense, it's much more expensive to buy a drafting machine than just a T-square. As I mentioned, we use triangles. There are two standard triangles that we use. We have a 30, 60, 90 triangle and a 45, 45, 90 triangle. And the combination of those two triangles, we can get other angles as well. I mentioned using protractors and a compass. The protractor allowing us to determine specific angles. The compass allowing us to draw arcs or circles. We can also use things such as a French curve, which just has a variety of curves built into it, so it's kind of like a template, if you will, that you can use to draw different curves. We can also use a divider, which looks very similar to a compass, except for it has just points at both ends. On the compass, one end has a point, one end has the lead to draw the circle. The divider just has 2 points, and it allows us to transfer angles, transfer line lengths, and do those types of things. And then we also have a variety of templates that we can use. So for example, if we are drawing an architectural drawing, a floor plan, and we're getting in and drawing the bathroom, instead of having to try to hand draw the toilet or water closet or the sink or the bathtub, there are templates that we can just put right down on our paper, trace the template, and get those nice unique looking fixtures in place very easily. So that concludes our Chapter 8, talking about the different technical drawing tools that we use in drafting. If you've done some drafting before, you're probably familiar with a lot of those tools. If you've never done any hand drafting, that may be new information, but would certainly encourage you to have the opportunity at some point to actually try to use some of that equipment, those tools, to do some technical drawings by hand.